welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading yourself and leading others. I'm John Laurito, your host today with a great guest. I've got Rob Delf, who's the CEO of Meta, a firm that's global, I guess, based in UK. Is that right, Rob?
It's based in London. Yeah, it's great to be here, John.
All right, great to have you, Rob. Appreciate you being on the show. Lots of stuff I want to pick your brain on because you are living a very real situation that a lot of leaders, not specifically find themselves in, but you're dealing with some of the challenges that they are. You have taken over as CEO of Meta, and I'd love to have the audience hear just a little bit about what Meta does and how you got brought into Meta, and then we'll transition to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it sounds great. So Meta is a SaaS application, so software as a service web app. And basically what we do is we help media entertainment companies categorize and distribute the information about their TV shows and movies around the world. So as you can imagine, with all of these new services that are out there, the Hulus, the Disney Pluses, the Paramount Pluses, the Peacocks, you need to get all of the information on there in a searchable, easy way to consume for a customer. And basically what we do is we help our customers organize that in a central place and then enable them to distribute that around the world, whether that's localized versions, localized synopsis. You need a Norwegian synopsis for this one, and really tracking all of that in the supply chain of film and television.
Gotcha.
That's it in a nutshell.
I love it. And I'm a huge movie fan, so you're speaking of something I love. When you are, so your customer basically is a streaming service, is that right?
That's right. Streaming services, distributors, and broadcasters, and anyone who's pushing, film and television content out, either via the old terrestrial broadcast or via the internet, which is more and more the case.
Got it. Okay. So what's interesting is you were brought in as CEO. Was it earlier this year, did you say?
Yeah. So in June, a little bit of the background there is I ran a business called Rightsline. I was the founder and CEO of Rightsline. We sold the majority of the business to a private equity group in November. And along the way, I'd known Meta. So Meta hasn't been around that long. Meta was started in 2018. And I knew the founder really well. And I found myself with, nothing to do during a pandemic. And, I was talking to the founder, and what we ended up doing is raising some money, and, to fuel some growth. And I came in as the CEO, and he is still the founder and the chief product officer. Sorry for the dog.
Yeah, it's all right. It's the world we live in now.
Exactly.
I could see him in the background there. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
He's out there. What kind of dog do you have?
She's a dog. We got her at during the pandemic, so I think she's a mix of one or two, but a Great Pyrenees and a Border Collie mostly. But she's great.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So one of the things we were talking about the fact you taking over a company like this, large company, and you've got basically you're leading an organization through Zoom basically.
Yeah.
And you were telling me, you really haven't, it's not like you gotten out to travel. You're in the middle of COVID. What's that been like? Not one thing to adapt to it, but you literally jump into a company. You don't have anything other than that.
Yeah. It took a healthy dose of, faith, sort of the leap of faith going into it. When the founder, Rob Tucker, and I, decided we're going to go down this path, it was like, okay, you know everyone there. One of the things that I've done in, my previous career and previous company is really, prided myself around building this, a really strong culture. And I have to tell you, I've spent some time just sort of staring at the wall, trying to figure out how you build a great culture when really your interactions are limited to scheduled meetings that you set up on Zoom. Mm-hmm. And yes, you've got all the other tools, you've got Slack, everyone's on Slack consistently, but does that define a culture when you're not in person? And really struggling with that a little bit because I think there's something to be said with just seeing each other in person and talking about things that aren't on the agenda, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing that I've found and experienced is actively taking the time to talk about things or connect with people where it's not specific related to the task at hand
Mm-hmm.
is probably the best tool in the bag of doing this. Because when you're in person, right? I mean, and this is just, kind of a little, off the cuff here, but when you're in person, there's a lot more sort of interaction, like, hey, what kind of dog do you have?
Yeah.
Or, like what'd you do on the weekends?
Yeah.
Whereas if I've set up a meeting with you, it's like, okay, well, here's items 1 through 6 that we need to talk about.
Right.
Let's start at the top. And it's a lot more transactional, right?
Yeah, totally. I hear you.
So I'd say that it's been less challenging than I think I originally thought it was going to be. Certainly from, the culture perspective and our business, right? Remember, we're a software company. So a lot of stuff, really can be done remote. We've got Slack, everyone's on huddles all the time. That's there.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to a couple longer kind of in-person meetings, however.
Definitely, I would imagine. But you bring up a great point. It's like, you're absolutely right. When you're on a Zoom or GoToMeeting, whatnot, it just seems much more transactional. And do you think leaders forget that, like that it's almost got to be this conscious thought that, listen, you got to still build a relationship and find ways to do that. Is that an oversight of most leaders now?
I mean, I think it's an easy trap to fall into, right? Because, we've all got our schedules, especially working from home. Like, there's a dog barking in the background, or you have a toddler that's going to run into the room. I think the easy trap to fall into is like, okay, we're here to get these things done, and then we're done, right?
Right.
And I think there's a lot to be said for, just, scheduling some time to communicate with people in leadership positions around you, at the company, and just chatting about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit awkward at first, kind of staring at each other on a screen, like, because we're so trained to be like, okay, what are we here to do?
Yeah, right.
As opposed to, exactly. I'm sitting in the desk next to you. Hey, what do you think about this thing? Like, that's a more natural human interaction, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, getting over that. The other thing actually around that, this is something that I've seen is I feel like, for better or for worse, people working remotely are a lot of times more efficient with their time. Because you can really easily say, like, okay, from 10 till noon, I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. And because there's no distractions and there's no one around and you're not walking around,
right?
You kind of get more done.
Yeah. Nobody's peering in your office or over your cubicle or anything like that.
Yeah.
You just, you got solo time.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Is that so? Because I remember, in an office setting, I mean, I used to get so much out of walking around the office, seeing you and just being like, hey, Rob, how's everything going? And just getting into a conversation. And that conversation sometimes would be so valuable. And I would look back and be like, wow, that's so great that I just even had that interaction with Rob because I learned this, or I was able to give him some guidance on that. What's the replacement for that? I mean, how do leaders now fill that void that they don't have those little 30-second interactions?
I think it's the $1 million question, because those 30-second interactions give you kind of visibility into how someone's doing. You can pick up on body language. You can pick up on, a lot of sort of the things that you aren't getting through Zoom. And you're kind of left with, okay, what tools do you have? Like, always backtrack. Okay, what else can we use? Yeah, you can connect with people on Slack, that's fine. I've found calling, just picking up the phone and calling every once in a while, that's not related to an agenda. So, like, the more you can take it off of, this is the stuff we have to accomplish today, versus just checking in and saying hello. Yeah. I think that goes a long way, right? Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's the last thing you want to do because you have 900 more things on your task list, but just reaching out and chatting for a bit is really helpful.
It's interesting. I just wrote a note, which is a really interesting concept. It's almost like thinking about, how many interactions do you have with your people that are agenda-based versus non-agenda-based? Like, that's right. Kind of we become so agenda-based in all of our interactions. It's like, okay, well, why are we talking unless there's a purpose? There's got to be a purpose why we're talking. We've lost sight of the fact that sometimes you don't know the purpose when you start a conversation with somebody and you find out it was super valuable.
For sure. And, it's, I think that, some of the greatest ideas, come out of the agendaless interactions, hey, how are you doing? Well, I'm struggling with this. Hey, have you thought about using this tool or approaching it this way? Like, those aren't things that you're gonna schedule some time. You know, typically those agendas are like, we're gonna brainstorm around this one problem, not just like generally how you're working.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Absolutely.
there is a challenge there. You know, I think if you'd asked me all of these same questions 3 years ago, my answer would have been, that's impossible. You'd be totally ineffectual. It wouldn't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is one of those things to, you know, I find it's like you take a step back and you realize that like we do really invent ways to kind of succeed or get around those obstacles.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just like we're using the tools at hand to make it happen.
Yeah, it is
And
amazing
that's
how adaptable people are, which that's
right.
actually an interesting concept because that really is a great segue into another big challenge that leaders have is helping people through change or even themselves, helping them adapt through change. And I think that is a great learning is that you look at something, I mean, just even the concept of walking around all day with masks and stuff like that, and you know, the whole
Right.
new way of life. Before that, we would have thought, no way, there's no way we're going to be able
Yeah.
to. Yet we adapted within a month. Everybody was like, all right, whatever, this is the new normal. Is there a lesson in there for leaders
Oh
regarding
man,
change?
for sure. I mean, think about it. It's like a great sort of case study on how we would think about the pandemic and everything that's happened before, right?
Yeah,
If you told me, if you told either of us that it was going to happen, we would have been like, "That's impossible. This isn't going to work. No one's going to do these things. It's the downfall of all business. Commerce is going to stop."
right,
And then you look at it now, and it's like, actually, it's not that bad. You know, most
right,
people I talk to, like, business is doing pretty well,
yeah,
economy's growing, like things are
right,
working out.
yeah,
And I think that there's a straight allegory to change in an organization,
yeah,
right?
right,
The minute you say like, hey, we're going to do this way now, you know, most people's immediate reaction is like, well, that's never going to work.
right,
Or
right,
maybe it's not that it's never going to work, but oh, I can see 20 different problems with that.
yeah,
And then when you actually get into it, it's like, yeah, there's challenges, but there was challenges before.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like you had
right.
people complaining that so and so was bugging them too much at their desk when they were trying to work. So it's like
Yeah, exactly. You know, and now,
kind of
you know,
half and
the
half.
time in a car with traffic and all that stuff that now you have that time back in your life. You're right. And now we have that to remind people of, hey, listen, see how fast and well you adapted to this whole crazy, unpredictable situation. And to your point, a lot of businesses came out of it better, stronger, many businesses that might have otherwise even failed. It just pushed them outside their comfort zone and forced them to think about their business totally different and flip it upside down. And out came this great solution that they hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's everything from, you know, making sure everything's, you know, digital and in the cloud, or, you know, these processes can be managed not by going to the office. I think it has created a lot of efficiency.
Yeah.
Um, it'll be interesting to see, and you know, this is my opinion anyway, is that the change is kind of permanent. You know, like even with when I talk to contemporaries, you know, in my industry, especially in the software industry, and we talk about going back to the office and what's needed, you know, I don't think that I don't think there's a desire from the employees or the management to go back to 5 days. Certainly not. Like all the studies say that, but even 2 or 3 days, like it might end up being a day a week, and then you know
Yeah.
think about sort of broader changes in that regard.
Yeah, I know a lot of companies that are thinking that way too. As you think about when things now open up and you're able to do the travel that you weren't able to do before, what does that look like for you, and what kind of changes are you going to make or not make based on that?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, in my previous job, I put on a lot of air miles. You know, it was like, oh, we have a potential customer over here in Australia. I'm going to get on a plane. I'm going to go see them. That's not going to happen again. You know, like it's just, you know, I think this period has allowed a substantial amount of reflection on how much time and money and environmental impacts that all that stuff has,
Hmm.
really, which is just to connect with someone that you could do on Zoom. And now because we've established the ease of which we can do that, um, that that I think a lot of that's going to go away.
Hmm.
I think that the travel that will be done, you know, is going to be much more targeted. Like, hey, I'm coming out for 2 weeks, and you know, we're going to do these things, and that'll happen once a year.
Hmm.
And outside of that, you know, maybe we don't need it. But
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because, you do remember when I was prior to doing what I'm doing now, I was in an office setting where it was an hour commute each way to work, and it was
Right.
only a few miles, but it was Boston, so it took forever. So I'm like 2 hours a day. That's 10 hours a week, 500 hours a year that I'm in a car. And,
It's massive.
maybe I'm listening to books or whatever, but it's still in a car. And it just, now you take that away and you have all that time to do something else, whether it's spend time with friends and family or, take up a new hobby or whatever. You've got all that back.
Right. And I think that's what it is. It's just sort of like a reassessment of the value of time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and if you think about it, it's not to get too deep, but it's really the only currency we have, right? Is our own time.
Yeah.
And, kind of it's really healthy to evaluate like where you're spending time to figure out like, I don't need to go 2 hours a day into an office just to sit there.
Right.
Maybe I go in once a week and I've set up meetings with people, right? And everything else I can do remotely. And I have enough trust in kind of like the employer relationship that works out,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And when you think about cultures and leading companies in that way, I think that's probably the most important, right? Is that everyone has the level of trust that the work is going to be done, in a consistent way, and then it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the trust is absolutely key. Rob, this has been fantastic. I know we're short on time here. I wish we had more. If people want to learn more about you or more about Meta, where's the best place for them to go?
You can check us out on our website, which is meta.how, not meta.com. That's a whole other company now. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, and that's Delf, RDLF.
Okay, excellent. We'll have all that in the show notes for listeners. They can just, we'll have the links in there that they can click to. But this has been great, Rob. Really, really great insights. I appreciate it. I know the audience will appreciate it as well. And hopefully we can have you back sometime, another time, maybe do a part 2 or something like that.
Love that, John. Take care.
Thank you. And thanks all for listening today. We appreciate your faithful viewership. As always, thumbs up, share, subscribe, like, all that kind of good stuff. Appreciate your future suggestions for content and guests. And go down below, give a 5-star review, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks. Thanks again, Rob.